guest. Our first speaker on the summit today is a student leader. She's an author, a peace activist. Her name is Gurmehar Kaur. Gurmehar lost her father, Captain Mandeep Singh, at the age of 2 when he was killed in a militant attack in 1999 in Jammu and Kashmir. As a college student in Delhi, Gurmehar launched a peace campaign advocating harmony between India and Pakistan. The campaign was later trolled by some political leaders, cricketers, members of the parliament, but she went on to become a voice for Indo-Pak peace, and she also wrote 2 books, Small Acts of Freedom and The Young and the Restless. She served as a speaker at the Harvard US-India Initiative in 2018. At present, she's pursuing her master's in modern South Asian studies from Oxford University and is the ambassador for UK-based charitable organization Postcard for Peace. I had just heard about you, I had just seen you, and I'm just so happy we are going to talk today.
Thank you so much, Manvi, for having me, and thank you so much, Ekta, for inviting me to speak. I am absolutely humbled and honored to be able to talk to the wonderful people who have registered. And I can't see your faces, but thank you so much for joining in the talk. It gives me immense happiness on a personal level that there are so many people who are willing to open up to receive this information, and not just my talk, but just information on Indo-Pak peace in general. And I think that's the biggest step, right? Which is opening yourself up to perspectives that you're not conditioned to accept. So we begin with the talk, with the conversation. And yesterday, I sat down with my notebook and I was looking at the topic, which is small acts, small acts of peace and freedom. And I was thinking, what is it that I want to talk about? Because when it comes down to Indo-Pak peace, especially in a women-led summit, there's talk of gender, there's talk of migration, there's talk of partition, there's talk of current day scenarios, the talk of nationalism, and then there's talk of state narratives. And then I was wondering, where does one even begin talking about peace? Where does one even imagine a world of peace? Ekta was having a conversation with Celia Elworth yesterday. I'm sorry if I mispronounced.
Yeah, Celia Elworth.
Celia Elworth yesterday, and she started a talk while she was introducing her, who's Celia Elworth is the founder of the Oxford Research Group and an absolutely wonderful woman, a pioneer in peace building. And when she was introducing her, she took a step back and almost like with almost starry-eyed, she said, what, my biggest dream for South Asia is that we operate as a South Asian Union, very similar to the European Union. And she immediately followed it up by saying, what, people call me a dreamer, and well, I'm okay being a dreamer. And I sat back and I thought about it, and I was like, what, I really buy into that idea. I really buy into that idea of cohesion, of almost interdependent living, and interdependence living, of having similar currencies, of free travel. And I was thinking that every single time that I have said this out loud, a lot of people have looked at me, even in Oxford, in LSR, in a lot of places that I've been, a lot of people have looked at me and they've frowned and they just like shake their head and like with a polite smile, they're just like, what, Gurmehar, you're a dreamer. You're such a sweet child. You're such a sweet girl. Right? It's very patronizing, right? And then I really sat back and I wondered, how is it that these people call us dreamers? How is it that interdependent living is not something that we're already doing? how is it that we're not living in a borderless world? Arundhati Roy's latest book, it's titled Azadi, and she starts the book by talking about the coronavirus and this pandemic. And there's a bit where she says that this virus is, well, she says this virus is brilliant in a way because it's borderless. It has made it has made a joke of man-made borders. It transcends borders. It's made us sit down and think of how entangled our lives are. And it's such a contrast, right? This natural virus that came out of nowhere, almost like a reminder in times like these, where populism, where the idea of us and closed borders, where you have a Trump and a Modi and a Bolsonaro, and Erdogan in Turkey, where you have these populist leaders consistently for half a decade saying that our countries, our borders, we need to protect ourselves. It's us and then there's them. It's our economy and then there's them. And all of a sudden there comes this little virus that you can't even see, that you don't even that you couldn't that you couldn't imagine would ever exist, and it's transcended boundaries and how, and borders and how. And it really and then it really made me think of this whole talk of our economy, with travel being banned, with the connection that we had with multiple countries. Now as world leaders, we're like sitting down and we're just like, oh my god, our lives are completely disrupted because we don't have access to the other person, because we don't have our goods, don't have access, travel don't have access, businesses don't have access. Students can't go to other places, and it's really, really made us think of what a sham the idea of a bordered country is. A bordered country doesn't exist. We are interdependent. We live in a very borderless world. No matter how many times your leaders consistently talk about, consistently like emphasize on these man-made borders. And as a response, I think to, in this moment, and like in the face of this reality, to say that we are a closed off country, that we don't need anybody else, that we're different than other people, that we are not interdependent, I think is a bigger lie and a dream than a European or a South Asian Union model would ever be. So thank you, Ekta, for like having that dream, which is quite literally a reality, that people just don't want to acknowledge. Uh, and yeah, and I think, going and just going off from there, it was just a response I had, and I couldn't say it then, but I've been thinking about it for such a long time. um, but yeah, thank you so much for saying it. And I think right now, if anything I have taken from there, and if anything that anyone else takes from this small incident that happened just yesterday, is that is that is that don't allow these people who benefit off of this idea of living in binaries to shut down your dreams, or and not even dreams, or like have you step back and have you question acknowledging what already exists. But yeah, going back to small acts of peace and freedom, the talk I'm meant to do, the things that I'm meant to speak about. So, when I've always thought about peace, for me, peace has been, as a child, I've consumed the idea of peace as flowers and butterflies and happy people, and just everyone living in harmony together. For me, that's a very basic understanding of peace. It was only when I opened up textbooks that I realized that peace is defined the peace is defined as the absence of warfare, which made sense, right? It's the absence of warfare. And I was like, fine, that makes sense. And then I went on to study South Asia in Oxford, and I was doing IR. And very shockingly, we're talking about wars, and we're talking about borders, and we're talking about how these countries, very academic, very standard IRS perspectives on things. And somebody in the class pointed out that India and Pakistan, and it was also written in a paper, that India and Pakistan since 99 was when I lost my father. Since 99 in the war, since Kargil, have been at peace. And technically, if you go by the definition, absence of war, we've been at peace. We've not had a single war. And what we've had in place of the giant war is low scale warfare. And not even low scale warfare. We've had low scale conflict, but we've been in a state of peace. And I remember just like sitting back and just being angry. I was absolutely angry. And then I thought about it again. How do we define peace? What then is peace? If in a book peace is absence of warfare, and India and Pakistan have been at peace, do I accept that understanding? Having lived the life that I've lived, having seen what I've seen, having received the knowledge of the violence so up close, am I ready to understand it? One thing is just acknowledging it. And then I remember talking about peace. I remember saying, and 99 was 22 years ago. My sister's 22 years old. She was 3 months old when her father passed away. And I remember talking about peace some 20 years after. At this point, technically, India and Pakistan have been at peace with each other for 20 years. I was 19 then, and I said, I said something very sweet, very nice, very kind. I'm a literature student, we think in poetry. And I remember, and I said, war didn't kill Pakistan didn't kill my father, war did, which is a very poetic statement from me, right? We're in small words, I'm trying to suggest an idea that Pakistan as a country is not responsible for me having me having suffered the loss that I did, but war as a concept is. And everyone was appalled by that thought. Everyone was, they were shook. How dare you? How dare you say that? How dare you not blame a country for your loss? You're meant to do it. And I'm an army kid. I've lost my father. I grew up absolutely, I grew up in a ridiculously patriotic environment. As one does. And all of a sudden they were like, how dare you? Like, how can you, out of all the people, say that? And I was, and then many years, and 5 years after that, I'm sitting in that classroom, and I refused, and I just like held my hand up, and I looked at the teacher, who's a pioneer in teaching IR, and who's published multiple academic papers and books, and has done thorough research in the area. And I looked at her and I said, I don't accept this understanding of, I don't accept that we've been at peace for 20 years, because we haven't been. I don't accept what you're teaching me. I don't accept this. And then we eventually went on to have a longer conversation beyond class discussions. And I was asked to define peace for myself. And I think since then, that has been the most important thing that I've learned is, one, how do I define peace? And I would love and I would ask all of you, whoever is listening, to like maybe drop a line in about how you define peace for yourself. So for me, and that's what I told her, for me, we have not reached a space or a place for peace. One, as long as people are hurting by the consequences of an ongoing conflict. And second, for me, we have not reached peace if we can't freely talk about peace. And today, we're in a place where we have neither. So we're in a consistent, stepping away from all academic, all thorough definitions of peace. For me, we have not yet achieved peace, and there's a long way to go from here, because people are still consistently hurting, and there is, and as I say this, and very recently, what happened, what came out as in some WhatsApp chats of a journalist. I won't name the journalist, but I'm assuming if we've been looking at the news, we know it. There's in that conversation, that journalist is celebrating escalation of very recent tensions with Pakistan. This massive celebration. They're like, we've won big. And I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, we've lost 40 of our men. We've lost 40 lives. 40 women are now widowed. 40 mothers have lost a son. So many children have lost their fathers. These kids will now grow up in a world that's absolutely brutal, without their parent, without without one of the most important people in their life, if not the most important. For me, I think both mother and father are equally important. So, one half of the most important person in their life. And they will have to come and understand it. They will have to accept it. They'll have to live with the trauma of it. They would have to live with, and not only live with the trauma of it, they would have to learn to celebrate it. And I think for me, that celebration was so hard. And that's the thing with any warfare, or any war across borders, whether it's a guerrilla war, or whether it's between militaries and traditional armies, it's between countries from one state to the other. That's the idea of, there's a certain imposition of celebrating and honoring your loved ones by celebrating their sacrifice. And a part of me really understands it, because you want to believe, right? You want to believe that you've lost something, and you're going through the trauma of it, but it's for a way bigger cause than, it's for a bigger cause, it's for an important purpose. And then I'm thinking that these children will have to now almost hold back their tears and come out and say, what, I'm proud of my parent. And of course they're proud of their parent. There's no bigger sacrifice than just the sacrifice of your life for something that's greater than you. But you're never meant to say, I wish it never happened. You're never allowed to say, I wish it never happened. You're never allowed to question why it happened. And then parallelly, there is a journalist, very well loaded with money, with power, with status, can afford whatever car he wants, can afford all kinds of travel, can afford massive homes, is extremely powerful. And he sits there and he says, we have won big. And I think about all the children, and I think about what an insult to their sacrifices, what an insult to their trauma, and what an insult to just to a regular people. life in South Asia, life in our part of the world comes so cheap, and often the state expects you to just to accept it and celebrate it, and I refuse to, and I refuse to think about it. But yeah, here's why here's why when I here's why when I think about defining peace, I don't think I could ever personally define it in I could ever personally define peace until we've reached a point where there's no trauma caused by it. Until we've reached a point where people are not consistently intergenerationally suffering from the consequences of it. So yeah, in this moment where we are not in a state of peace, so where do we go from here? How do we reach that state, right? Because that's the goal. That's why we're all, on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, or morning, if people are in the UK watching it, or wherever you're in the world, on a Sunday day, we've taken time out. We could be brunching with our friends. We could sit down and be having tea. Why are we tuned in on the Zoom call? So where how do we bring that peace? Where do we start? And I think, and this is what I genuinely, truly believe, it comes in very small acts. It doesn't come in it's not a big dynamic movement. With India and Pakistan, and even with Bangladesh, what is standard is that since partition, we've been fed with these larger state narratives that have demonized the others so much that at this point, I'm at this point we have this almost demonic image of what the person looks like across the border. I see so many young people who travel for the first time, and that's also such great privilege, right? Not everybody has that access. Who travel abroad and meet a Pakistani for the first time, and they're shocked, and they're shocked, and they're lost, and they're like, I never thought they would look like us. What are you saying? They watch our movies? Are you saying we share similar? Are you saying their homes look like ours? Are you saying we eat the same food? Because in my head, what is a Pakistani? A Pakistani is that's a state narrative, right? We've all been fed with not just state narrative, but also your Bollywood, your TV, your Arnab Goswamis of the world. I'll take the name if I have to. What is a Pakistani? A skull cap wearing, a burqa clad, AK-47 holding, long beard person who you're meant to be scared of, and then you go and you look at somebody and they look like you. And the biggest thing we can do for peace is challenging these state narratives that have been put on us. And then when I think about freedom from there, right? There is so much freedom in dissent. When I think of lack of freedom, I don't. For a very long time, I believed I lived in a free country, and I believed I live in a democratic country, and I lived in a that I can say whatever I want to say. I can be whoever I want to be. And then I went back and I thought to myself, am I oh sorry, but yeah. And I went back and I thought to myself, am I truly free? And what does true freedom look like for me? True freedom, true freedom, true freedom looks for me where I'm not weighed down by trauma, where I'm not weighed down by state narratives that I have to hold on to, where I'm free to talk to talk about whatever I want to talk about, where I'm free to question the definition, which is where I'm free to question the definitions of nation, the creation of a nation, where I'm free to question the purpose of that creation of the nation. And it's especially now, because what is the purpose of a free nation where, you know, our minorities are treated the way they are treated, you know, where our minority is almost invisible, where there's no food on our table, where we don't have jobs, where we don't have education, where we are constantly on an everyday basis confronted with police violence, state violence, violence, verbal violence via bureaucracy. Where is freedom? Because I don't see it. And I think, which is why I constantly go back to small acts, because it's not in like this massive dynamic moment where any of us will see peace coming. We will have to create it. We will have to create it by questioning whether we're really free, by questioning what that freedom means for us, by questioning that if we were free in 47, where has it led us, by questioning these purposes, and by then questioning that, hey, we have this great freedom, which as Punjabis, for us, it'll always be partition. You know, it's never Independence Day. It's always partition. So much pain there. By questioning whether we are free and what that freedom means. And if that freedom still means trauma, if that freedom still means pain, if that freedom still means hatred, then what is even the point of it? And I think I'm just going to leave it with that question and with that thought, because that's something that I consistently think. You know, what is even the point of it? And I think true freedom will only be achieved once true freedom and true peace will only be achieved once we are free from this everyday pain that has been imposed on us in the name of these nation states.